Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Steve Kellogg. Steve Kellogg has a unique blend of humor and insight to understand how people in life really work. He practices practical spirituality, meaning applying spiritual growth and service principles in daily living. He has been called a polymath due to a variety of interests and capabilities. An experienced trainer and facilitator, Steve has presented to a variety of business and growth-oriented groups. He is the author of books on personal growth, business, and spirituality, but is also a copywriter and marketing consultant for small businesses. His background as an architect led him to a career in the planning of large-scale development projects in multiple states. His focus is on a strategic approach and helping clients create effective marketing messages and projects. He has a keen understanding of professional service firms as a board member, marketing director, department director, project director, and general manager. Steve has presented seminars and workshops on all aspects of how to start and build a consulting business and on realizing personal and spiritual potentials. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Kimberly, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so you have so many different skills and abilities and things that you have mastered. So why don't you start out by telling us about you, where you grew up, and how you started out, and how you accumulated and did all these things?
Well, it's a challenge to encompass all of it because I've lived it, and that's just the way it is. Anyway, I was born in Nebraska, and so I'm a Midwestern boy by heart, and lived there till I was 8 years old, and then our family began a venture of going to Texas and eventually to California. And California basically is where I grew up and became a multiple life person in the sense that I ended up going to architectural school at Berkeley and became an architect for a while before I went into the land planning arena. So my whole business side is that particular track of professional service firms, doing professional services, rendering services, running firms in many, many aspects. And it's a business I totally enjoy because I love the creativity of the architecture and planning world. To me, creating new projects, new communities, new activities is thrilling, fun, and the joy of my life. Along the way, as a teenager, I began reading Edgar Cayce, who was kind of a starting point for me, and eventually got involved in various metaphysical groups. And right in the early stages of my career, I went to Alabama to join a spiritual group. I call that my cult years.
Okay.
So I think everybody needs a few cult years in their lives because I joined a group of people and became very much involved there. It was a spiritual group that delved into a lot of esoteric subjects and ideas, and that has informed my life. At the same time, I have had these two tracks. One is a way of making a living,
Mm-hmm.
and the other way is a way of making a soul. So it's, that brings me up to the present. Oh, by the way, being in the real estate development related arena, I have had the opportunity to live in multiple states. Why? Every 7 to 10 years, the real estate market hits a wall. You're all familiar with that, whether you experience it directly or not. And so I'd have to move from one state to another to stay alive. And so from California, went to Alabama, then to Colorado, then back to California for a bit, then on to Hawaii. And then for some unknown reason, I left Hawaii and moved to Arizona. So people say, is Arizona your favorite place? I say, no, I've lived in the Rocky Mountains. I've lived in Hawaii. Arizona is low on the list. Oh, Southern California too. So what I would say is that I am where I am and I'd be happy where I am. So that kind of sums things up. Right now, I am semi-retired. I'm still doing some consulting work, some writing work, and have started several websites in the personal development space. So we can enlarge upon that as we go forward. Does that kind of give you the brief overview?
Yes, it really does. And I'm just curious, since you have that real estate background, with everything that's happening right now. Should we buy? Should we hold? Should we sell?
I'll tell you what, it's an interesting time. It depends where you are. I mean, there's a trend right now in which people are moving out of large cities, especially on the coasts, and moving to the suburbs or moving inland or to the country. And that's because what's going on in the cities people don't like, and they find that they can work remotely. And those that have the capability and the money to do so are moving. And it's going to be a huge drain on major cities, especially the coastal cities. New York is losing a good portion of its tax base, as I was reading earlier today, because people with means are moving out of the city. So I would not be buying in major metropolitan areas. And prices are fairly high right now. It's recovered from the 2008-9 recession, and prices are up. But if the deal is good for you and you've got the wherewithal to support it, then real estate is one of the areas that I believe in, because I don't believe in the dollar. That's another realm of interest, is in gold and real money, I would say.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I have know at least 3 friends that I personally know who live in California who are moving to Georgia, where I live. That they're trying to get out of California. So.
It's become oppressive tax-wise, regulation-wise. I had a friend that was a businessman in California a number of years ago. He sat on a panel for the mayor of Los Angeles, and the mayor wanted them to find out why so many people are leaving. And they said one simple answer: it's regulations. And yet they're still laying it on. So certain people don't understand that certain activities of the government disincentivize people from doing certain things. So
yeah, that makes total sense. So what about the planning that you did, like, of communities? What about that sparked your interest, or just you're passionate about?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's kind of interesting. I found that I was kind of a lousy architect, in that I did not embrace the construction and technology side of architecture. My mind is more abstract, likes dealing with concepts and big picture items. And so the planning was kind of a natural place to go, because I had a good visual imagination and good creativity. And so dealing with projects on a larger scale and not having to deal with the micro level. I let the engineers work out the details, and I provide the big concept. So it's actually been thrilling, because in different locations that I've been, California was a lot of planned community work. Alabama, I did a little bit more planned community work, even though I was culting in those days. And then in Colorado, we got more into multifamily types of projects. And so I even saw a project through to construction, working for the developer. Then back in California is more variety of projects. Then Hawaii, we were doing a lot of government work, because the regulation, the federal regulation in Hawaii is extreme. And since everything's close to the water, then you've got more federal regulations. So, Hawaii is an entirely different world business-wise. So that's without going into details. And here in Arizona, it was a lot of planned communities. And I've recently done some work with some Indian communities, working with a consulting firm that services the Indian communities across the country. So kind of fun and interesting and diverse at the same time.
Yeah. So how are the Indian communities any different than, do they want something different than what non-Indian communities want?
The culture is completely different. There is kind of a sense of entitlement in the notion that the government probably has done too much. Because if you coddle people, then you raise their expectations that they will continue to be taken care of, and that applies to welfare as well. But regardless, I mean, there's tremendous need. They all have their casino as their cash cow, and they're looking for other means to diversify their economy and their income, so that they can be more self-sufficient. Because housing is a major problem for the most of the Indian communities that I'm familiar with. Mm-hmm. So, but at the same time, people are people, and they all want well for themselves and their families, mm-hmm. and they're planning for the future. In fact, they have a longer view of the future than the Howley does. That's an Hawaiian term. So, so it's the same and it's different at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I have a question for you, just something that I have envisioned. Is there ever going to be communities where the community is built up and it's built up around a school, or it's built up around so that the kids who live in that community all going to go to that school? Does that make sense? Where it's like maybe mm-hmm. parent funded or something like that. Do you ever see communities like that where they're building it around, almost making it like a family, if you will?
It's a little bit of a challenge to do that because of the nature of land ownership here in this country, because a builder will go out generally and buy a tract of land and build houses, and maybe there's a school that's part of it. In your larger scale planned communities, the ones that cover thousands of acres, then you can create kind of the neighborhood concept more easily, because you're dealing with the numbers and as you have numbers, then you've got greater components. You begin to have more commercial sites. You begin to have school sites. You begin to have the components that make a neighborhood and make a community. And so it becomes much easier to do so. And while we planners try to do that as much as we can, the builders are still saying, how many homes can we get into this acre of land?
Mm-hmm. Well, conflicts of interest there.
Well, it's just multiple objectives attempting to all be served.
Mm-hmm. So in your life and in your business now, how do you combine your business, the practical day-to-day, with the spiritual?
That is an excellent question. And sometimes the worlds conflict. But spirituality basically is a personal thing. It's sort of how you approach your life, the level of consciousness that you bring, the type of energy or qualification or quality of energy that you bring to a situation. I was sending out a whole bunch of text messages the other day as part of an online business I work with. And with every text message, I would send a little pulse of love with it. So you can blend these things in a lot of different ways. And right now we're talking spirituality, we're talking business, we're talking a number of things, and yet it's just the same two of us talking. And so the quality of our lives and energies and what our purpose is and what we're trying to accomplish can still manifest.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So things are really up and down, topsy-turvy, people are being displaced or finding different things to do. And all this happening with all the changes, how do people find that meaning in life? How do they find maybe their path or their meaning?
Well, I just wrote a blog post the other day on talking about everyone seeking for the new normal or going back to normal. And I just want to say is that, in my opinion, there is no normal. but we all seek it. I mean, there's the natural tendency of people to want tomorrow to be the same as today in terms of its predictability.
Mhm.
We're entering a period of uncertainty, extreme uncertainty, and it seems to be cascading. What this coronavirus has done, in a sense, has been to accelerate and bring out everything that was already in motion.
Mhm.
The economic issues. People were saying, "What a great economy we have." Uh, we're still a house of cards.
Mhm.
They're very, very nice cards, but uh, a guy I follow, Doug Casey, talks about the dollar and the interest in the dollars. Everyone wants to own the dollar, and he says from his standpoint, it's just the dollar happens to be the best looking horse in the glue factory. So. So it's all relative. I mean, the dollar's strong, and people want to flee to it, but there's no place else to go after that. And with the extreme creation that's going on of money out of nowhere, we're creating an interesting situation. Regardless, how do you make sense? How do you find meaning? You've got to have meaning in your life, regardless. You don't find meaning outside in the stuff that's going on. You recognize that it's going on. You appreciate the fact that for the new to emerge, the old has to give way. Mm-hmm. And the breaking way away and up of the old can be extremely painful. The 60s were an example of this, in which the hippies were challenging anything and everything, and ideas were changed, and a lot of attitudes and political thought and everything was in flux, and it was changing and evolving, destroying the old. And this is what technology does. This is a disruptive technology is what people are using, the term people are using. Well, in the area of personal values, personal growth, what we are as a culture and a society is being rapidly disrupted. And what we're seeing happening in our cities is not the new that's emerging, it's the disruptive process, as unfortunate as it is. And if you can recognize this as a birth process, birth on this planet is very traumatic. I mean, there's crying, there's blood, there's pain, there's all of this stuff. It's a very traumatic experience, but it's once completed, it is a beautiful experience. Well, when a nation, when a country, when a planet goes through a rebirthing, it's painful. I don't know if that can provide any meaning, but still, meaning is internal, and what you find meaning in yourself is what's going to sustain you through the outside.
Exactly. And I heard someone say that it just manifests what is. In other words, the things that were under the surface that we were maybe ignoring, it comes to the surface in this disruptive type of time.
This is exactly it. And this is what I was saying earlier about the pandemic. It seems to be accelerating everything that was already in motion. And if you're headed downhill, you're going downhill faster. If you're headed uphill, you're still climbing.
Uh-huh. That makes sense. Yeah. So how can we create a life where we're actually going on the upswing? We don't like going up, not going down.
Well, I like to say that personal growth is a contact sport. And that it requires full engagement, full involvement, and you can't just read a book, attend a webinar, be enlightened for a weekend and expect big differences to occur. And that it's all, again, it's all inside. It's what you're trying to accomplish. Have you set yourself on a path of personal discovery and growth? Are you studying? Are you learning? For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's prayer. Whatever process gets you into connection with a greater source, then that's what you must be doing, because that's the only thing that's going to sustain us during these times. And it might be just good old-fashioned religion for somebody. I don't know what it is, but it's different for everybody. But the important thing is that you're constantly learning, striving, and growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if someone finds themselves in the place where, let's say their job is no longer there, how would you advise them to start thinking, or how should they put their mind in the right mindset to actually find that new thing and see what that could be?
If you're at all awake, then you know that there are no guarantees in life and no guarantees in the job market, especially, and that is accelerating drastically. And I am in a business right now, an online business, where we're helping people to create an online cash flow. In other words, you've got to seek alternatives, and alternatives that make sense for you. Whether it requires more education and training, I'm a little bit skeptical of just plain education, because you need something that is practical, usable. So unless you're in a trade or a specific profession, then general knowledge is of little value in one sense, in the sense that you can apply it to make money. And so we need to look at this. There's a website called Peak Prosperity, which is talking about, these fellows are talking about preparing ourselves for the future. And they're saying, this is not prepper stuff, but it's building in resilience. It's your ability to adapt. And this is economically, it's mentally, spiritually, physically. In other words, you have a few supplies put aside. You try to find yourself in a more sustainable situation. But in terms of jobs, you've got to reinvent, you've got to recreate. And so I've just started a website or a Facebook page called Start My Own Online Business. And the whole intention of that is to show people alternatives. I mean, it might be that multi-level works for somebody. It might be that affiliate marketing works for somebody. It may be that they've got skills that they already have that they can turn into a consulting or coaching business. They can become entrepreneurs. You've just got to move. You got to get after it. But initially, with the whole COVID thing, people were just in shock. They just were not believing what was happening.
Exactly. Now, you do have a blog where you have a lot of wisdom there. You want to talk about that and what people will find?
Well, I call it my footprint factor.com blog. And this is more of a self-transformation type of situation. I call it hacking self-transformation. I actually don't like the term personal growth because it implies adding knowledge and adding more on, whereas I want to be removing stuff and moving vertically, let's say, as opposed to moving horizontally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so this particular blog is now I'm going to be feeding this into my website called relaunchnetwork.com, which is oriented to helping people relaunch themselves in remarkable ways. It's just in its fledgling state right now. I don't have any programs even associated with it. I do have my book, Your Karmic Footprint. I've got some other materials. So it's a wonderful time. It's a wonderful time to be embracing personal growth and transformation, because we need to adapt, we need to change, and be more of what we really already are.
Yes. Yes. Be ourselves. Be our true selves.
That is true, and our true selves are way more than what we normally accept.
I believe that. And your book, tell us why you wrote your book and what your book's about.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's an interesting book. I signed up. I was at a meeting called CEO Space, which is used to have 5 forums a year in which they bring business people together. I attended a talk by Mark Victor Hansen, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy. And he had an author's course saying, I'll help you write your book or something like that. I signed up for it. And I didn't have any idea what I wanted to write about. So the next morning I happened to be sitting in McDonald's having breakfast. And all of a sudden the whole thing, karmic footprint, the words karmic footprint came to mind. I didn't know what a karmic footprint was at the moment, although I could kind of figure that out. And so that became the topic of this book I have written. It's called Your Karmic Footprint: How Thoughts and Feelings Create Destiny. And what it is all about is that helping us become more conscious of what we are creating. Because with every step we take, we are creating our future. And our future is our destiny, and our destiny is our legacy. And so we are creating our legacy every passing day. My question is, are you creating the legacy that you want to be creating?
Yes.
And suddenly invert the whole thing around and say, okay, this is my destiny, this is my legacy, this is what I want it to be. What do I need to do today to make that a reality in 2, 5, 10, 20, 40 years, whichever it happens to be. So it's a short book. I'm in the process of amending it and revising it and expanding it. So I hope within the year I will come up with a revised edition, but I have a website called yourkarmicfootprint.com, and it's on Amazon. So you can download a Kindle version or get a print. So your karmic footprint, footprint is kind of a branding item I've sort of used since. That's why I have a footprint factor and lots of other footprint things going on.
Well, it's very memorable. I mean, everybody can visualize a footprint.
Yes, yes. And as you look behind you and behind your footprints in the sand, realize that they are brought you to where you are now. And I heard a friend say the other day something I really like. It says, I have not come this far to come this far.
That's a really interesting quote.
Yes, it is.
So have you ever had any aha moments along the way, or just moments of realization that kind of changed the direction you're going in?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I can't say that I've had too many. A great number of aha moments. There's sort of been steps taken along the way. The step to leave a career and go to Alabama was a major step for me in terms of my growth. And it was a fairly quick decision that was suddenly made. And it wasn't an aha moment, but I had, it brought a lot into my life. There was the time several years back in which I was struggling. And if anyone's on a path of growth, they realize that there are downtimes. There's darkness along the way in which you kind of are up against a wall. Mm-hmm. And that's where I came up with the notion of flip the switch, which I have in a free report that's on Relaunch Network website. And that flip the switch means, okay, it's time to make a change, flip the switch and move, take action. Because as Einstein once said, until something moves, nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to suddenly make a decision and take action is my aha moments come long after the fact. Let's put it that way. When
Yeah.
I suddenly realize, oh, that's what's happened.
And when you said flip the switch, what I thought of was a train coming up, and then the switch, you flip the switch, and then it turns off, goes to this other track. In other words, going in a whole different direction.
That can be, if that works for you, that is absolutely perfect. I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but that's wonderful. That's a wonderful analogy for that. Because we want to, our life is a series of small adjustments. And I like to use the analogy of a car. Is that someone wants to go somewhere, they're not quite sure where they want to go, and they're sitting in the car. And as long as they're sitting in the car and haven't committed to any movement, nothing's going to happen.
Not going anywhere.
Yeah. But once you start down the street, you're suddenly going somewhere, and you may find this is not where I want to be going. And so you now have the ability to change direction and make choices. And so lots of things start to happen once you're in motion. But if you're not in motion, nothing.
Nothing. Just idle.
That'd be true.
Yes. So just to ask a personal question, what for you gives you the most joy, happiness, fulfillment in your life at this point?
Well, two things. I have a lovely wife. We've just been married a little over 9 years. My first wife passed in 2004, and my current wife, we had both reached the point where we had given up on looking, and we found ourselves at a networking event, and so she is an absolute joy to me. And the other aspect of that, and we work together on our online businesses. She's got a wine business. I've got an online marketing business. And we both work on both those businesses. And the other part of that is any type of creative activity. I love writing books, articles, creating plans, whatever creative activity it is. That to me is pure bliss.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for all your insights and wisdom.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's I like the whole interaction idea because we have a chance to exchange, and you gave me a really great idea with that train track, so I can enlarge upon that, and I hope I provided some insight to you too.
Well, thank you. Yes, you certainly did. And one more question before we get off.
Sure.
What to you makes the most incredible, amazing life?
I came across a definition of success as stated by Earl Nightingale, who is one of the early self-development gurus back before there was such a thing as a guru.
Right.
in that field. And because most people are kind of taught by the self-development community that success means you've got your beautiful spouse, you've got this huge house behind you, you've got the immaculate car in front of you that you're sitting on, and so it means suggests material wealth, and they want you to do that so that so they can sell you more stuff. But his definition of success was the progressive achievement of a worthy goal. And I love that because it doesn't equate to a very specific end condition. It just means that you're making progress towards something that is worthwhile. And that worthwhile can be anything that floats your boat. as long as it's making a contribution to yourself and to the world, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you are doing that. And to me, that's what makes a remarkable life.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you so much, and God bless.